My father abandoned me and chose his golden son over me, refusing to pay for my college education. He finally called after my son was born. I confronted him about his favoritism. After seeing those pictures, my relatives forwarded them to my dad. Since he chose not to assist me with my college expenses while fully funding my cousin's tuition without my cousin's request, my dad and I haven't spoken in almost 10 years. Although my dad has always supported his brother, I felt that paying for my cousin's college education was going too far. Just to provide you with a little additional history, Peter, my cousin, and I were born within a few months of each other. Peter and I had a rivalry when we were kids, despite the fact that we weren't related. My dad and I were constantly vying for his attention. It was just my dad and me when my mom abandoned them when I was a baby because she didn't think she was ready to be a mother. Following that, Peter had both of his parents in the meantime, but they didn't pay him any attention because they were constantly extremely busy at work. That's most likely the reason he looked to my dad for that. My uncle and aunt ran their own cafes full-time, and my dad was a big shot in sales at his company. Okay, so let's get to the point. The cafe that my dad's brother and his wife owned wasn't doing so well, so they frequently required money and assistance from my dad. It was a decent job that my dad had, and was in a position to assist them. I never gave it much attention or became unhappy about it since I never imagined that my dad would choose them above me, his own child, in the future. In terms of grades, my cousin Peter and I were pretty close in high school, although he had slightly greater difficulties, particularly in math. I felt like I had won big when I kind of pulled ahead by the end of the year. That is, until things started to go wrong. My father revealed that he would not be funding my college education, advising me to apply for a scholarship instead. However, he was willing to pay for Peter's tuition as Peter's parents were experiencing financial difficulties. I disagreed with my dad a lot about this decision since I couldn't believe it, but he wouldn't change. He went so far as to say that I ought to have more empathy and consider Peter to be a sibling. My dad got really upset when I pointed out that Peter and I aren't blood relatives, thus, we're not really brothers. He said I might as well move out if I was going to talk like that. I felt that he had chosen Peter above me, and I was already furious with him for not supporting me in my college studies. I simply departed and spent some time camped out with some buddies without really planning it out. I never really got to hang out or talk to my dad again after the whole incident happened. He made a few attempts to get in touch with me and expressed his desire for me to return home, but he never once brought up the subject of helping me pay for college. I tried my hardest to get a student loan or anything similar, but since I was alone myself and had no adults to support me, it was like hitting a brick wall. As a result, I had to leave college after only a few days as I was almost broke. My next priority was getting a job, but wow, it seemed like every position paid pitiful wages or required you to live your whole life at work, which meant by class time. Although it was a very problematic place to be, I didn't just mope around. Even though it was a temporary position, I was nevertheless able to secure it from a corporation. I had to work extremely hard there because I had a ton of bills, rent, groceries, and other expenses. It wasn't easy to accomplish all of this on my own. I was under a lot of stress since I knew that my housemates wouldn't be too happy if I didn't pay my fair part of the costs. I so had to work very hard without using any quick cuts or freebies. However, as fate would have it, things began to improve for me. My efforts eventually paid off, and I was able to advance within the same organization to a much better position. It proved that there was more to that employment than just a paycheck. That's where my wonderful wife and I met, and now we have this amazing little child with us. Therefore, I can't say that everything was difficult looking back. In a way I never anticipated, things kind of fell into place. Even though I was deprived of the entire college experience and the life I had imagined for myself, I managed to overcome my circumstances by going above and beyond what other people my age had to. Hey, it was all worthwhile in the end. As things stand right now, I'm satisfied with the outcome since I think my years of hard work have made me the person I am today. To be really honest, I have no regrets. Peter reportedly works for a different company and has a family, but he doesn't seem to make as much money as I do. I suppose that must be rather embarrassing for him. A few of my friends have seen Peter's home and daily routine, and they remarked that, despite the fact that he attended college, it's not quite as cool as my setup. The news that Peter wasn't performing as well as I was gave me a slight lift in self-esteem. I almost called my dad to find out his thoughts on that, but I decided against it because I didn't want to go to that extent. In essence, I felt as though I had won and Peter had lost. That was a win in my book, despite the fact that it appeared like everything was in his favor right away. My dad continued attempting to make amends with me over time, but I never felt the need to poke fun at him or anything. Every year without fail, he remembered my birthday, Christmas, and New Year's. I didn't answer him, but I also didn't ignore him entirely. I was secretly hoping that he would simply apologize once. The thing that bothered me the most, and was the craziest part, was that he made an attempt to get back in touch with me, but he never once expressed regret for his actions. It seems as though he saw nothing wrong with his behavior and felt completely justified in picking Peter over me, despite the fact that I am his son and his own child. And the main reason I never replied to him was because of that. Even after texting me to express how disappointed he was not to be at my wedding, he still wished Haley and I eternal happiness, which briefly caused me to feel a little guilty. Nevertheless, the realization that he still hadn't expressed regret for everything made me stop feeling sorry for him. He obviously didn't feel sorry for me enough to apologize. Even after the wedding incident, he continued to text, and I continued to ignore him. He never called, which I found strange because if he had wanted to, he could have, but perhaps that was too much for him. Then everything was altered. My son was born a few weeks ago, and we announced the news on Facebook. That's when my dad called me for the first time in almost a decade. I replied, unsure of what to anticipate. I had hoped that this would be the turning point in his apology, perhaps due to his desire to meet his grandson. But hey, what do you know? Once more, I was disappointed. He didn't say sorry or even talk about all the stuff that went down between us. Instead, he just talked about how upset he was that I got married and had a kid, and he was missing out on all of it. He said his heart was breaking, and he really hoped I could just let bygones be bygones and not make such a big deal out of everything that had happened over the last decade. I really couldn't wrap my head around how he thought I was blowing things out of proportion. I mean, come on. He literally chose to pay for my cousin's college instead of mine because of that decision. I had no choice but to quit college and start from scratch, working my way up from the very bottom. If I hadn't had to leave school, I would have been way ahead in life. But nope, I didn't get that chance. All thanks to him. And it's not like I was slacking off in school or anything. I was doing pretty okay. You know, I wasn't the top of my class, but definitely not at the bottom either. I wasn't good enough to get a scholarship, but certainly not so bad that he should just toss me aside for Peter. When I heard from him after all this time, I lost it. I told him straight up how much I regretted even picking up the phone, wishing I'd just blocked him ages ago, because all this while I was stupidly waiting for an apology. But that apology? Yes. It was never going to happen. I finally got that for someone to say sorry. They actually have to feel sorry first. And it was clear as day he didn't feel a shred of regret. He even tried to argue with me about it, calling me unfair. Is that really true? Coming from him? Who doesn't even seem to grasp the basic idea of fairness? In a moment of total anger, I blurted out that maybe I was actually his second son, and that Peter must be his first, considering how differently he treated us. And oh boy, did I push the boundaries there. I hinted that maybe there was something sketchy going on behind the scenes, like an affair between him and my aunt, which could explain why Peter was born. That might have been taking the claim a bit too far, but it just spilled out in the heat of the moment, driven by all the unfairness I felt from his favoring. After I urged my dad to go converse with his other kid and not to waste my time longer, I just hung up on him. Looking back, I suppose I might have messed up, since the next thing I know, it wasn't my dad reaching out, but my aunt. She sent me a text claiming what I had said was far out of line. She was unhappy because she felt I pulled her into this mess on purpose simply to get revenge at my dad. She noted that my statements had upset not just one, but 3 people, and they all thought I owed them an apology for crossing a line. I haven't texted back yet, mostly because I'm not sure what to even say. To be honest, I don't comprehend why my dad had to go and spill the beans about our private chat to everyone. It was just between me and him, and I didn't want anyone else to get tangled up in this. I uttered such words in the heat of the moment, aiming them at him, not intending to damage anyone else. I honestly don't care much about how my dad or uncle feel about this, but I do feel horrible about upsetting my aunt. She's always been fair to both Peter and me, never selecting sides or comparing us. Even though Peter is her kid, she could have easily played favorites like the rest. But she didn't. She's actually sweet, and I feel terrible for making her feel guilty pulling her and Peter into this mess, especially with that comment about Peter being my dad's son was out of line. I talked it over with my wife, and she didn't take sides, but did comment that what I said was fairly harsh, especially considering my aunt was always good to me. Although I know I should apologize, I still feel like my dad's blabbing is more to blame for this whole situation than me. Does that mean that I'm the evil guy for mentioning that my cousin is my dad's other son? First update. I eventually texted my aunt back after staring at her message for over a week without knowing what to say. Yes, I did apologize for what I had blurted out. I made an effort to convey how deeply my dad's actions affected me, and I just said something without giving it any thought in the heat of the moment. My intention was not to involve her or my uncle in this mess. I was angry, and I told her so straight out, but I never wanted to hurt her feelings. In addition, I was a little taken aback when my father revealed our private conversation. I kept my mouth shut, hoping my dad would figure out that I was also a little pissed off at him for making a scene. I reasoned that if my dad was listening, my aunt would forward my message to my uncle and dad, even if I didn't spell it out for him. He would understand that this was my manner of apologizing to her rather than to him. Haley felt that apologizing to my aunt rather than to my dad was a wise decision. Besides, my dad doesn't really deserve an apology. Not after everything he's accomplished. No matter how much he tries to downplay it, nothing changes. Selecting Peter above me, forcing me to drop out of college without once feeling guilty about it. That doesn't set well with me, I agree, so don't feel sorry for him. My uncle and I were never really able to get along. We weren't close, even while I lived with my dad. The only person who gave me proper treatment was my aunt. My uncle was always making comparisons between Peter and me. Furthermore, my dad was absent when it counted. Allow them to feel however they please. I've made amends to the one person who I felt deserved it, and that's the boundary I draw. It's excellent if she accepts my apology. If not, I'm still good because I fulfilled my responsibility. She can now decide whether to accept it or not. Second update. So my aunt eventually decided to text me back after what seemed like forever or like 3 solid days. I was pretty much thinking at that point that she had chosen to ignore me or something. It was a relief to hear from her again that she was fine with my apology. She then tosses in a curveball, though. It seems that both her spouse and my father are eagerly awaiting their own apology because they thought I had overlooked them as well. I want to be quite clear about this. I'm not going to give away free candy in lieu of an apology. In particular, not to them. It seems as though they have never truly shown me support or concern for how I am feeling. Why should I worry about their emotions at this point? I only considered saying sorry to my aunt since she wasn't like the others. When I was a child, she really was kind to me. With all the tenderness they offered me, the rest of them may as well have been on another planet. In addition, my father always stressed that you should never apologize until you really, genuinely mean it. So what do you think? I'm heeding his words of wisdom. I'm just not feeling it, so please don't make any bogus excuses. That seemed to irritate my aunt, who attempted lecturing me about how important it is to put other people's sentiments aside, as if I should just shut up and be polite. Now here's the thing. If they're angry with me, it doesn't matter to me. I gave her the explanation again. This isn't going to keep me up at night. My son and my wife are the center of my universe right now, and that's all. Everyone else is free to go through a sob party in my absence. My aunt seemed prepared to continue the text war, I noticed. To be honest, I didn't come for it. I then pressed the block button. Haley hopes that this drama can end. I'm right there with her, man. However, I have a feeling that they won't let this pass unnoticed. They are overly eager to develop this into a full-fledged story. 3 updates. Okay, so let's get the details. I definitely guessed right, but I'm not sure if I'm more like, yeah, gummy, or simply irritated. Peter decided to have a little tantrum online, posting our unwashed laundry all over his Facebook page. He became all emotional and said that I was simply making fun of his parents because I was envious of him being my dad's favorite kid. It truly amazes me that he believed this to be some shocking revelation for everyone. It's not as though I've been suppressing my emotions. I've been rather transparent about how unjust I felt about the whole favoritism stuff, and let's speak the truth. To our group of pals, our alleged rivalry wasn't exactly shocking news. Therefore, I thought Peter's attempt to stir up some controversy on Facebook was completely pointless. He even had the gall to demand that I apologize to his dad, me, and his mother in addition to his own. Talk about exaggerating the situation, don't you think? I nearly let my fingers speak for me as I contrived a witty retort to spill the tea for everybody. But after that, I exhaled, hit backspace, and let everything go. I knew deep down that this was precisely what they were hoping for, so I chose not to give fuel to their drama fire. They wanted me to get my hands dirty, toss in a few sentences, and see how they twist the story to make me the antagonist when in reality, it was my dad who ignited the fuse in the first place. I so effectively put a lid on their drama pot by deciding to zip it. Haley was the voice of reason because I always believed that what I was doing was the right one. It wouldn't be in my best interests to dive into that burning chaos. Where it mattered, I've already reached out and made my contribution. They are free to continue their woe is us act if they so choose. I'm going to leave the arena. I choose to block Peter for that reason. Given that there is little overlap in our friend circles, it's not as though his tirades will alter the opinions of those who genuinely know me. They know the entire tale. That's the part that matters most to me at the end of the day. Who needs so much drama after all? It's best to remain calm and continue talking to those who understand the full picture. Fourth update. It appears that my strategy of ignoring Peter's post full of drama worked. In fact, he removed it. It appears that he is seeing my friends who are in the know, threatening to reveal my version of events in the remarks. Got a hold of him. In essence, they advised him to scrap the post or confront the music with some sobering facts that would not paint him or our family in a favorable light. Peter had to have been under pressure to maintain the flawless picture that he, my dad, and my aunt have been attempting to project, all at my expense. Yes, he did indeed drop the post. But notice this. Then, attempting to warn my pals that they were supporting the wrong cause and would go down in history, he slid into each of their direct messages. Come on, like this small family argument is going to be remembered for eternity. He's just being far too extravagant. I can't help but feel a little embarrassed for him secondhand. To be honest, I find it a little weird that I'm even related to them. Their behavior is completely out of control. However, I'm just glad he stopped exposing our family's problems to the world. Even though I would have retaliated if he had continued to share it, it would have been quite uncomfortable. Really, all I can do is cross my fingers and hope that this is the last instance. I have no desire to get back in touch with them or to learn about whatever absurd thing they decide to do next. As I've mentioned before, all I want to do is relax with my son and wife. I really won't be watching any more of their drama. Update number 5. Okay, so I haven't updated you guys on what's been going on in almost a month. Firstly, I would want to express my sincere gratitude for all of your support and nice words. Haley and I are very grateful for it. Knowing that there are people out there, even individuals we have never met, who are rooting for us, is kind of fantastic. It has great significance. And I'm so happy that I made the decision to open up about what was going on with me when I was confused and attempting to make sense of everything. You may wonder what's new. A few days ago, my uncle sent me an email out of the blue, and I have to say that it caught me completely off guard. His decision to reach out surprised me a little, especially considering our last conversation was so tense. I was on the verge of disregarding the email when Haley suggested that I see if they were contacting me. It might be something significant after all these time. I opened it because I thought she had a point. To be completely honest, I'm still having trouble understanding what I read in the email. And now, for the big reveal. In actuality, Peter is the biological son of my dad. Yes, my dad and my aunts. It simply amazes me that they had the affair I suspected. I'm a little bummed that my crazy guess was correct because it indicates that Peter and I are, in fact, blood relatives. I always clung to the idea that Peter and I weren't related, at the absolute least. But no, it turns out that we are half-siblings, and I will always be stuck with that. How did my uncle discover this small family secret, then? It appears that my uncle was out getting coffee when my dad stopped by their residence a bit ago with the intention of talking to my aunt about the whole issue I caused. My dad was just finishing up a conversation with me when my uncle entered, speculating that Peter might be his son. My dad was forced to repeat everything he had said because my uncle had not intended for him to hear it. My uncle began to worry why my dad was acting so strangely when he was delivering the story. My aunt and dad began to act much more offended than they should have been by what I said, making a big issue out of it. My uncle was aware that I was merely venting my irritation and had no intention of making serious accusations, but the way people were responding as though they had been attacked personally led him to believe there could be more to the tale. It was an over-the-top response that alerted my uncle. It was strange that they were being so defensive, he thought. And even after I apologized, he still didn't feel comfortable with them insisting that he write that Facebook post about it. He sensed something wasn't quite right, but he was wise enough not to try discussing it with my dad. Not everyone would want to hear it. Furthermore, he was too cautious to discuss it with his wife for fear of upsetting her. Thus, my uncle made a decision that no one else had considered. He tried to get in touch with my mother to ask her to clarify anything. It took him a few weeks to find her, but once he did, he was able to communicate with her. She had some really exciting news for him. She attested to the entire disaster. It seems that she was never truly prepared to be a mother in the first place. She finally found the ideal out when she found out about my dad's romance. This also clarified how she avoided having to pay child support and still received a sizable settlement payment. However, she did choose to tell my uncle the truth because, after all these years, it felt like the perfect moment. My uncle sent me a really sarcastic email to let me know about everything, sort of thanking me for being a pain in the ass because that's what got him to find out about his wife's affair. They are now on the verge of divorcing. My dad no longer communicates with one of them, and Peters chose to sever his relationship with all of us. My uncle then added, somewhat bitterly, that he hoped I was happy now. Furthermore, what do you know? Well, I am. It seems like a great weight has been lifted off my shoulders for the first time in a long time.